Sorry. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about Mountain View and my time there. And I really was looking forward to this because I really enjoyed my time there. It was really good for me. And I really feel like I have you all to thank for the opportunity to go there, both with the financial support that you gave me and just, I grew up here and I am who I am a lot because of you people here. So I wanted to thank you for helping me get this opportunity to go to Mountain View. So, as far as I know, there are very few people here who have been to Mountain View. I would highly recommend it. It is a nursing home facility in Virginia. It is in Arota, Virginia. It is about an hour away from Harrisonburg. If anyone's familiar with where that is, it is it's a 40 bed facility, so when it's full capacity, it has 40 residents in it. It specializes in the care of dementia, so like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that type of thing. It was started in 1962 by Oak Grove Mennonite Church, it's actually Beachy Church, right there in Arota. It's about 2 minutes away from the nursing home. It is still the church that sponsors Mountain View. It was started kind of with two purposes in mind. One, as a voluntary service unit to give young people the opportunity to go somewhere for a term of service, and also to reach out to the citizens there in Virginia. It's in Madison County, so that was kind of the main thrust, to connect with those people there, with the residents, the resident families. And so actually there's usually a fairly long waiting line of residents that are trying to get into Mountain View, and residents of Madison County are given priority because that was the original goal or purpose of starting Mountain View. It was remodeled at least once, maybe twice, in the 60 years that it's been going, and it has just a really long history, and it definitely has its own culture. I had never been there before I went there for my term of service, and there was definitely some culture shock. I had no idea what I'd signed up for, and that wasn't really a bad thing, but it was just really broadened my horizons. And so as far as the structure of Mountain View, the administrator is Ryan Hoover. He's from Minnesota, or originally from Ohio, but moved to Virginia from Minnesota. Some of you would know him. So he would be the legal head of Mountain View. He is pretty much responsible for everything that goes on there as far as the medical side of things. The personnel director, when I got there, was Mark Yoder. He's no longer there. Linford Byler replaced him, but the personnel director would be in charge of recruiting staff, and just really any staff needs, any staff issues that arise. The personnel director's in charge of that, in charge of dealing with that. And then the discipleship director was Jeff Kanagi from South Carolina when I got there, but now it is Nate Yoder, I think. It was right around the time I left that was changing over. But those three are kind of the big three of Mountain View. Ryan would be the boss, and Mark, or Linford now is kind of the dad of Mountain View. All the fun relational issues that come up he gets to deal with. And the discipleship director is the pastor of Mountain View. There is a discipleship program there that is for the VS staff. So there's an evening activity planned every night, 2 times a week. It is class. The discipleship director is in charge of that. And it's a bit like a Bible school class, but it wouldn't really have like the homework that a Bible school class would. The director of nursing is Leroy Eby, the Leroy Eby that was here a long time ago. That was actually one of the few connections that I had to Mountain View before I got there. He is director of nursing, so he is directly in charge of all of the operations, everything that happens on the floor where all the residents are. He is directly in charge of that, and then Ryan would be his boss. And then the minions, or the ones who do the bulk of the work there, is the CNAs, and those are pretty much all volunteers. There's a few paid CNAs that work at Mountain View that would live in the community there, but most of them would be volunteers. And again, most of the people that come there, especially the guys, pretty much all the guys that come there, have zero medical experience when they get there. But Mountain View is very blessed to have their own CNA program there, so they don't have to send the volunteers to another college or training center to get trained. They can just do it right there. One of the nurses that works at Mountain View is also certified as an instructor. So in general, when the volunteers get to Mountain View, they're coming for CNA. There's also need for volunteers in like housekeeping and the kitchen, a few in maintenance, but the core of Mountain View is definitely the CNA work. So that's what a lot of people come for. And when the volunteers first get to Mountain View, they are put through the class, and the class is a 140-hour class, I think. It usually takes a few weeks to get through it. It's just a few days a week, 9-hour days, that can be very boring. But there are some practical skills in there, obviously. One hard adjustment for me was just the shift of work. I was used to working outside, kind of dirty, heavy construction work, and that switched to sitting inside for 9 hours a day. I wasn't really sure what to do with myself. And there's so much paperwork and regulations involved in the medical field, and specifically in the care of the elderly in nursing homes. It is just insane. The technicalities, the paperwork, the regulations. According to Ryan, I did not check into this myself, nursing homes are the second most regulated industry in the U.S. Nuclear power is the only one that's more regulated. So that sounds impressive, but it can be kind of a headache in day-to-day operations. So again, the bulk of the CNAs are volunteers. The department heads, like the maintenance director, the kitchen manager, they are also volunteers, but they are usually young married couples. There's Mountain View campus is actually pretty big. There's the nursing home, and then there's multiple houses on the campus as well, where like the director, the administrator, and and a lot of the department heads would have houses on Mountain View campus. So they're right there close. The average term length is 15 months. I think the assumption is it takes about 3 months for someone to get trained in and actually to become useful there at Mountain View. So you have about a year of usefulness. And for some reason, I committed to 18 months when I got there. Still not quite sure why, but so I stayed 18 months, and again, I committed to that right after I got there, and that was another thing. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I'll get more on that later. So that's the overview. In general, again, you stay 15 months, and towards the end of that 15 months, you can go on a discipleship trip, which when I first heard about it, I didn't think much of it, but it's actually a really, really good experience. It's a trip that Mountain View pays for. They pay for everything, and you go overseas to a mission. It can be Asia or Africa or South America, and you usually don't really get to pick anywhere. They usually give you a few options, 2 or 3 options, and you are part of a group of people that would have come to Mountain View around the same time that you did, and you as a group usually have 2 or 3 options, decide where you want to go, and by the time you go on your DT, as it's called, you're usually either really good friends or really bad enemies with the people that you've been there with. Most of the time, they're learn how to get along at least. And so you're over at one of the missions for 10 days, and I actually went to Kenya on my DT where Jacobs were. I really enjoyed that. Looking back, I'm not quite sure how I wound up at Mountain View. When I first heard about it, I was at Maranatha Bible School. There was a girl there that her family was there at the time. And I had heard Leroy's were at Mountain View, didn't think much of it. And when I first heard about the idea of young people voluntarily going and working at a nursing home, I kind of scoffed at it. I didn't quite understand why people would do that. That was my attitude for quite a while, actually. But a month or 2 after I got home from Bible school, would have been, I think, March of 2019, Ryan and Leroy came to our church and did a presentation about Mountain View. And I just remember sitting back there in the back row, watching it, and I just remember being impressed by the mission and the heart of Mountain View, of, I guess, the servant spirit there, or from what I saw in the presentation. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, okay, that is commendable, still not for me, though. And just over the course of several months, it was just an idea that wouldn't go away. It kept sticking in my mind. It just became a better and better idea. And so ultimately, I decided to send my application letter in, and I was kind of thinking this is the last straw here. Like, obviously, if I get accepted, then that's where I should go, and if not, that's pretty clear. And I got accepted, and I got to Mountain View on October 12th of 2019. And the first part of my term was fairly normal. I started CNA class a week or two after I got there, and the guys' work schedule usually consists of CNA shifts, would be the bulk of it, but there's also a few maintenance shifts every once in a while that you help with, and some janitor shifts. They kind of sound like the same thing, but janitor shifts would be pretty much you sweep carpets, pick up trash, and wash dishes pretty much all day. It's a very set shift, very scheduled, whereas maintenance would be more, you could be doing anything. You could be fixing a leak in the roof, replacing light bulbs, you could be building a fence, you could be doing pretty much anything that needs done on campus there. There was just a lot of adjustments the first couple weeks when I got there. I was 18 when I got there. Looking back, that's a little young. I definitely wouldn't have wanted to be any younger when I got there, just because of the stresses that come with working there and living in the guys' dorm, the change of work, the change of pretty much everything. I realized very quickly that, like I said, Mountain View has its own culture. I did eventually adjust to it, but it took me a while, honestly. There was maybe once or twice where I thought maybe Mountain View wasn't the best place to be, but I was very thankful that before I went to Mountain View, I was very sure that's what God wanted me to do. And looking back, that was extremely crucial in me staying there, because if I hadn't had that, I would have crumpled because just the adjustments of going there, then once COVID hit, that totally changed the game. To be bluntly honest, when I first got there, I had very lofty expectations. I'd heard a lot of good things, and the guys' dorm was not as holy as I was hoping it would be. And that shook me up. It really did, because I knew that would be my home for the next 18 months. And that worked out better than I thought it would right at first. Just adjusting to it, learning to understand the people I was with, and them getting to know me. There was some hard adjustments when I got there, but I eventually got the swing of things. So I was there in October, and the CNA shifts are divided into 3 shifts to cover the 24 hours. There's the early shift, which is from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then the late shift is from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. They overlap, the 2 shifts overlap for an hour. And then night duty is from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. So night duty and the earlies overlap 3 hours in the morning, because that's the busiest time of the day. They overlap 2 hours actually. It's when we're getting the residents up in the morning, getting them ready for the day, so it's definitely the heaviest workload then, so we have the most aides on the floor then. And the main job of the personnel director is making the schedule. It's a huge job. They schedule about 30 people to cover all the shifts, all the kitchen shifts, all the CNA shifts. It's a week-long schedule, comes out every Saturday, and it dictates your life. I should have a slideshow of it, but I have a paper schedule back on the table under the mailboxes, so you can look at that afterward. It's just a spreadsheet, has a column of names on one side, and then follow the row over, and that's the shifts you're working for the week. You can request shifts, but in general, you have no control over what you're working for the next week. The exception would be night duty. Night duty, you usually work for 10 to 14 days straight. The idea being, once you get your sleep pattern flipped over to sleeping during the day and working during the night, it's usually best to stay in that as long as you can. So we just take turns going on night duty. That was very interesting for me. Just, it does weird things to your brain and to your body just to work during the night instead of during the day. It's just it's an odd thing. And then usually by the end of 2 weeks, you're ready to see daylight again and live like a normal human again. So up until March of 2020, Mountain View was operating about as normal. I remember hearing a little bit about COVID in like February, some coronavirus in China. Didn't give it a second thought. I thought there's headlines like that all the time. Not a big deal. And then, we started hearing more and more about it, and the administration and Leroy, were talking about it a little bit, and it was kind of this is a 2-week thing. It'll blow over in no time. But things just slowly got more and more serious, and by the middle of March, I think it was March 13th or 14th, Mountain View locked down, which meant resident families could no longer come in to visit the residents, and we staff could not leave campus. So if we needed anything in town, we would tell the deans, and the deans would go get it for us. Travel plans got canceled. We really thought we had it rough then. We did some complaining and felt life was unjust, and we were in lockdown for 2 weeks, I think. And looking back, that actually wasn't bad at all. I mean, yes, we were confined to campus, but life on campus pretty much continued as normal. There was no masking, there was no distancing. We were just kind of in a bubble and couldn't get out of it. And we started routine testing, COVID testing for the staff. It's either in the spring or the fall. Weekly testing. And before the first test, we were very nervous. Of course, we'd heard horror stories about it, how it hurts like crazy, and we were very nervous, but it wasn't that bad. And we got used to it because it was weekly testing. So I think the average staff member got tested about 30 times. Of course, depended on how long they were there, what their stretch of time was. They did eventually let people stabbed themselves instead of having someone else do it, and that helped a lot. But during the summer of 2020, it was fairly stable. We had no cases in the nursing home. Life was fairly normal there. There was some restrictions. Just Virginia was a pretty strict state, so as far as going to town, eating at restaurants, that obviously was restricted. Just, I don't know exactly what you all experienced here, but I know there was significant guidelines in place. But life at Mountain View continued fairly normally until probably midsummer was when we started masking when we were working directly with the residents on the floor. When we were outside of the resident area, we did not have to mask, and we had delayed that long for two reasons. One was we didn't have a supply of masks to mask, because there's a lot of staff there and there's a lot of interaction, so we went through thousands of masks. And up until then, we had been in lockdown, so the risk was very low for it coming in, but then when we opened up, we had to start masking. But even then, summer was probably the most enjoyable part of my term. And I also have some picture books back there on the table. Feel free to look through them after the service. The picture books give a very slanted view of my life at Mountain View, because the pictures in there are from all my days off and from all the parties and good times there at Mountain View. So that's a very slanted picture of Mountain View life. We were not allowed to take pictures back on the floor for privacy reasons. So there is, I think there's one picture of the work environment back there, and that picture was approved by the administrator for use. So that one's above board. But there's also a Mountain View newsletter back there. It kind of gives an idea of the staff, who the staff are. There's the main body of staff would be the volunteers, but there's also nursing students there that are going through the nursing student program. So they're there for like 3 or 4 years. And yeah, look through the Mountain View newsletter. It'll kind of give you an idea of that. COVID didn't really hit until the middle of September of 2020. We were right in the middle of Camp Week, which is when about 20 youth from all over the U.S., but mostly the eastern U.S., come to Mountain View for a week. They clean the place from top to bottom and just experience a little bit of Mountain View life. They go with us on our days off and just experience it a little bit. It's pretty much a recruitment effort by Mountain View to bring in youth. It started off really touch and go, because Camp Week started on a Saturday, and on Saturday all 3 of the admin were quarantined because of exposure to someone who tested positive. So all 3 of the administration, Ryan, Linford, and Jeff, were confined to their homes so they could communicate with us through text and call, but they could not lead out or have in-person meetings. So that was a real change up, but we decided that, we can work with this. We'll follow through with Camp Week anyway. Then on Wednesday, a few days later, one of the girls that lived in the dorm tested positive, and that was kind of the nightmare we'd all been waiting for, because with living in the dorm, many people were considered exposed. So I believe around 25 staff were quarantined for 2 weeks, which means they can't enter the building at all, which means they can't work any shifts, which meant over half of our working staff were gone just like that. Thankfully, that time, not a lot of the guys were quarantined. There was a few, but it was a lot of girls that were quarantined. And I just remember talking to Linford later about it, and he said he just sat there at the computer feeling so helpless because he knew things were just going to pieces and he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't even be there. We found out, Bethany, the girl that had tested positive, we found out about it on a Wednesday morning. I was actually off that day, so I had gotten up around 9 and was sitting at the table eating cereal when the dean came in and said Bethany had tested positive. And it was just kind of an, oh, like, now what? Now what happens? I didn't know what to do, and our day off group was told that we can't leave campus until we figure out what's going to happen with this. And again, the administration couldn't have an in-person meeting, so they were doing a Zoom meeting, trying to figure out what they're going to do. Leroy was also quarantined, so he couldn't be there. So one of the nurses stepped up and was acting as director of nursing at the time. I went up to the nursing home because I didn't know what else to do, and the deans were going around and telling people that they were quarantined. So there was multiple people who were right in the middle of working their shift and got pulled and sent to the dorm to pack their stuff and head to a guest house for 2 weeks. It was kind of chaotic. It was a very serious case of wanting to do something but not knowing what to do. I was not quarantined that time. It was really hard because I just remember sitting in the lobby trying to figure out what I was going to do. And out in the kitchen, one of the girls got told she was quarantined and just busted out crying. We all wanted to do something, but didn't know what to do. The guy that was working on the floor on the CNA shift got pulled, so one of us went and covered for him. And like I said, I think about 25 staff ended up being quarantined. And so for the next 2 weeks, we worked a lot. There was just so much psychological and mental stress wound up in that. One of the hardest things was seeing the residents quarantined. Usually, when you'd walk back into the resident area, you'd walk back into the great room. The great room was like the center, then there was 2 halls, north and south hall, going off of the great room, and the nurses' station was right by the great room, so it was just like the hub of activity. And you walk out there, there's people walking around, there's a big row or a big circle of recliners. The residents are sitting in the great room. There's music going. Sometimes there's an activity going, and even the residents that can't talk, that you can't really communicate with, they can still watch activity. They can still somewhat socialize. But when Bethany tested positive, all the residents were confined to their rooms, and some of them understood what was going on. Others did not. They didn't understand why they needed to stay in their rooms. Some of them really, just the social interaction they really missed. And also, because the residents were confined to their rooms, they could no longer eat together, which meant we had to have about double the staff for meals. Before COVID, the people that were actively on shift were enough people to help the residents eat their meals. But because they were split up into their rooms, we had to have about 5 volunteers come in for every meal to help feed. And that was something that stuck, and I think is still happening at Mountain View to this day. And it's just very hard to wake up at 5 a.m., work your shift, get off at 3, and come back 2 hours later to work another hour. It just kind of runs you into the ground. And during quarantines, there simply aren't enough people to cover everything. So sometimes you would work an early shift and then finish another shift in the afternoon. What helped out a lot, what actually kept Mountain View going, was former staff that had been at Mountain View and then left, came back and helped. I don't know what we would have done without them. This first quarantine, there was enough guys to keep it going, but unfortunately the next 3 months, pretty much from September through December of 2020, it was pretty much large groups of staff in and out of quarantine. It honestly felt a bit like a shooting gallery. We were all standing there and weren't sure who was gonna get quarantined or test positive next. Some people got quarantined up to 4 times. So that was almost 8 weeks of doing nothing. The first quarantine, people who were quarantined were required to stay on campus, but after that they did allow people to go home, which helped a lot for the people in quarantine, but it didn't help at all for the people who were working. Yeah, the last 3 months of 2020 were by far the hardest of my life. Life was just turned upside down. You had no idea what was happening from one day to the next. Like I said, we were testing at least once a week. At times it was twice a week, so every time we tested, we knew someone could easily test positive and put another 10, 15 people into quarantine, and we were getting run ragged. There was extra workload. There was a lot of extra procedure back on the floor with COVID. We had to get we had to get a partial set of vitals on every resident 3 times a day. That was just one example. The extra feeding was another thing. And honestly, about the biggest part for me was just the psychological side of things. You had little to no control over your life, and just for me personally, I did not go into quarantine until November, and by that time I was the lowest physically, spiritually, and emotionally that I've ever been. I had kind of reached the point where I was just kind of shut down emotionally because I had just dealt with so much that I didn't feel like I could handle anymore. So I just kind of shut down. I wasn't sleeping, and I just had no time for personal devotions. I felt like I was just in survival mode for weeks on end and was kind of in a spiral dive, but didn't know how to get out of it. What kind of pulled me out of it was I was put into quarantine. My dormie, one of the 3 guys that slept in my dorm tested positive, and that put me into quarantine for 2 weeks. So I felt very useless because I knew my friends were working like crazy. They were working double shifts because I wasn't there, and there was many other guys that also were quarantined the same time I was. So on the one hand, I was able to recharge during those 2 weeks that I was in quarantine, but on the other hand, I knew other people were just I just don't know how to describe the feeling. Like, usually at Mountain View, there's just like energy and teamwork and just life, but it just was no longer there. Your support group was gone. Like, that's what kept Mountain View going, was your dorm, the people you lived with that, like, you could, when you had a rough shift, you could go talk to them, you could blow off to them about it. And that was gone. Like, because of COVID, because of the restrictions, we had so many regulations cracked down on us because our personal lives were so closely linked to Mountain View. The regulations that affected the home affected our dorm lives. We could not, in the dorm, in our homes, we could not eat together. We had to have a mask with us all the time. We could not unmask unless we were in our bedroom. So if you were in the living room in the dorm, you had to mask. So that support structure that kind of kept us going was just kind of pulled apart. And I think that's what was really so hard. There was extra workload and the support group was gone. Things did start to look brighter by around New Year's. We were in very strict our social life was very strictly regulated, and that was very hard emotionally, but it also kept us out of quarantine. So it's what kept Mountain View going, but at the same time it was very unhealthy for the staff. And at times it seemed there was no hope for anything changing. Looking back, I mean, yeah, it was 3 months, no big deal, we can make it through it. But we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know how long this would be. We didn't know when things would change. But around New Year's, things did improve. The vaccine, I know that's a very hot topic, but the vaccine did come. It came to Mountain View, I think in February. It was February of 2021. And because it's a medical facility, we got priority. And so most of the residents and a lot of the staff got vaccinated, and that changed regulations so much. And I just remember the thrill of being able to sit at a table with 6 people and eat a meal again. Like, it was just incredible to have interaction again with people. So I left it in April of 2021. So the last couple months of my term definitely felt a lot more normal. There was definitely still regulations, still procedure that was vastly different from what it had been when I got there, but it was very encouraging just to see how things had improved. it was the roughest time of my life, but God just taught me so much through it that I would never have learned otherwise. I just remember feeling prayer like I'd never felt it before. I knew people were praying, and there was just times when I was totally shot. I felt I'd given everything I had. And then for some reason, I just felt energy, and I felt able to go on another day, and I didn't know where that came from. But then I remembered, like, people are praying. This is the support group that I can't see. The people back home, or the people right there that were praying for us there at Mountain View that got us through. So from what I've heard, I've kept in contact with some of my friends that are still there. From what I've heard, Mountain View is back to a lot closer what it was. The residents are back in the great room. They're allowed to eat together, and staff life is pretty much back to normal. God is good. There's a lot of special songs and moments that just happened during those rough months. The one that sticks out to me is a song that I heard and learned when I was in quarantine. It's called "When I Go Home." It is written just in the last 10 years, I believe. And it speaks of the promise we have of eternal life, the hope we have to look forward to. And I just remember at more than one point at Mountain View, it felt like that's all we had left was about the only bright spot left. I actually sang the song "When I Go Home" with 5 of my fellow VSers, staff members, and it's just a very special song to me. And just real shortly here, there's a men's group that's going to come up and sing it. But before I do, is there any questions? I know we're over time already, but is there any questions that anyone has that they would like clarified?
Can visitors come and go like normal again?
I believe so, yes. A few months ago, they could, actually a long time ago, they could come. It was just screened. They're very screened. But now I believe even that has lifted a lot. So yes, visitors can come and resident families can visit the residents.
What would you say are some good ways to encourage people who have left their church to go serve somewhere else?
Keep in contact with them, and just, let them know you care. Even just, messaging them every now and then, see how it's going. Prayer really does work. And, I always knew that in my head, but at Mountain View, I definitely believed it more. All right, could the men's group come forward now?
If the trial